And the Oscar goes to... Who gave this son of a bitch his green card?
What is happening, folks? Welcome to another episode, Nerds at Night. I am your nerd, Blake Money Blakeweather. Let's get right into it. The year is ending. I've seen a lot of movies. I want to tell you what my top 10 favorite movies of this year are that I've seen. I'm not saying this is the best list of movies that came out this year or ones that are going to win Golden Globes or Academy Awards or anything like that. I'm telling you, of the movies that I saw this year, I'm going to give you my top 10 that's on that list. But I want to shout out the movies that I haven't seen yet. There's a couple of them that probably might have made it on this list that just won't be there because I didn't get a chance to see them. I probably will in 2024, but I just haven't seen them yet. These movies are Godzilla Minus One, Maestro, Beau is Afraid, Napoleon, Talk to Me, and Infinity Pool. I feel like a lot of people will give their top 10 and then gloss over movies that probably they deserve some flowers. So I want to give shouts on a few honorable mentions real quick. Let's start with Pinball is a surprising, simple, and funny biopic with a lot of heart. Pinball tells the story of Roger Sharpe as he helps to overturn New York's 35-year ban on pinball in the 1970s. It's got a lot of great humor and a nice love story as its B-plot. Next on the list, I was honestly so surprised at Dungeons & Dragons because I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. Chris Pine is so great, and every actor in his little clan plays their parts so well. I watched this opening night to a full theater, and I sat by family with two kids, and then I ended up laughing more than the kids, which I'm very sure was very concerning to the parents. Nonetheless, this was not at all like a money grab like I thought it would be. It's got action, comedy, and a solid plot that's easy to follow along if you're like me and don't know anything about Dungeons & Dragons. And it also has a ton of Easter eggs and references if you're a Dungeons & Dragons person. So if that's your bag of tea, you'll get a lot out of this. Also, can we please make this a small franchise? Let's move on to the next one. This movie was so great and really captured the spirit of the video game in a way no video game movie has quite done yet. It stays true to much of the source material, and it fills in the blanks with explanations that make sense for things that we don't really know about. The voice casting was great. Can we say enough great things about Chris Pratt and Jack Black? Like, Jesus, like they definitely stole the show. And this is one of those movies where I can definitely like just rewatch it throughout the year, like whenever I want to. So whether you're an adult or kid, like this movie just definitely speaks to the inner child inside of you. Next up, one that really flew under the radar, but was on my watch list till by chance I watched it on my flight to Atlanta back in September. And I don't know why I waited so long for this. The director is George Tillman Jr., who directed Soul Food, Men of Honor, the Barbershop series, and Notorious. Chris Davis, who I knew as Tracy from Atlanta, plays a titular character and really captures a lot of the mannerisms and energy of Big George himself. The boxing in this was very solid. It's not the best of all time, but it did stay true to the old fights as they happened in real life. If you're a boxing fan, this is a must. And if you're a fan of just a solid biopic, definitely add this to your list. Next up, a series comes to an amazing close with this James Gunn adventure. There couldn't have been a more heartfelt way to end it and keep audiences happy besides the way the movie played out. The humor is balanced so well with great action scenes and plenty of close calls for all of our big heroes. Also know there are some tearjerker moments that happen in the movie that deal with Rocket's background. I know I definitely shed a tear or two. With that said, I'll definitely miss the Guardians, but I look forward to seeing how they get integrated into the Avengers movies going forward. Next on the list, a very under-the-radar film that earned all the praise at every movie fest it was entered into. Simply put, it's an updated take on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein while also being a horror film with a commentary on poverty and the social class system, all taking place at a low-income neighborhood. I may have some bias on this one as we interviewed actor Keith Holliday, who plays the enforcer in this movie, but it's definitely one you should watch that I'm sure went way under your radar. Let's move on to the next one. The movie about the GameStop stock and the characters who won and lost on each side. Dumb Money feels very much in line with The Big Short, where we are following characters who stand to gain and lose based on the current economic climate in America. While not as great as The Big Short, Paul Dano does an amazing acting job portraying Keith Gill, who in real life led the charge for normal people to pursue buying stock in GameStop. I laughed a lot. If you're looking for a solid Friday night movie, this is a real winner. Speaking of real winners, Tetris is the dramatized biopic of how Tetris was introduced as a mass product to the world. Taron Egerton does an amazing American accent, and I'm usually not one for adding onto history simply for the sake of making a movie more exciting, but here it definitely works. It's got a lot of heart, and as far as biopics go, between this and Pinball, I enjoyed this a little bit more. Next on the list, this was almost in my top 10, but hours prior to watching this movie, I ended up watching a few short documentaries on YouTube about the Von Erich family. So when the movie did not follow timelines and actual facts and some of the scenes throughout the movie, I was a bit turned off. I will say I did listen to an interview with the director Sean Durkin where he said it pained him to have to make changes that weren't completely accurate to real life. And I felt that as someone who wanted to completely love this movie. There's also so much to enjoy about this movie. Zac Efron, Holt McCallany, and Jeremy Allen White absolutely steal the show. The wrestling was choreographed by professional wrestler Chavo Guerrero, and it really shows because those are some of the best parts of the movie. It really feels like you're watching a pro wrestling match with the oversold hits, to the graceful flying off the turnbuckle, to the trash talk that takes place between the promos. Despite Zac being closer to the look of the late Kerry Von Erich rather than Kevin, and the trash actor who attempted to try and portray Ric Flair in the movie, it has a lot of heart and you feel it all throughout the film. And finally, last but not least, if you ask me, this is the best Ninja Turtles ever made. Hands down. It's not a question. It's funny, it's got action, and the turtles actually feel like teenagers because they're actually played by teenagers. And the villain selection is top notch. It really does feel like a year one Ninja Turtle movie, and it feels like we see them very early on into their ventures in saving New York from mutant villains. I wound up liking this way more than I thought I would, and also, can we just give some flowers for the animation style they use? It's so creative, and it's definitely both for kids and adults who grew up with any variation of the Turtles as a kids. So now that that's done, let's get to the real list. And before we get to the real list, let me just pour up a drink of Screwball peanut butter whiskey. It was one of my Christmas gifts, and I really love this stuff. It's not my all-time favorite, but it's definitely going to keep me warm as I go through this list with y'all. Ooh, here we go. To everybody out there, cheers, and let's get into what y'all came for. Number 10. Bottoms was a comedy that literally came out of nowhere. It had a lot of like independent feel to it, but it's one of those raunchy sort of teenage come-of-age type super bad movies that we don't see a whole bunch now. The acting in it is so superb. It's so funny. And Marshawn Lynch really steals the show in every single scene that he's in. The plot is basically two high school senior girls who set up a fight club as a way to hook up with cheerleaders. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, and so is a lot of the shenanigans that ensue. It's really funny, and it's a real throwback to the movies that millennials grew up with in the late 2000s. I highly recommend this, and I really feel like this flew under most people's radar. Number 9. Barbie is one of those movies where you either loved it or hated it. I really had no interest in going to see it when I saw the preview because I'm like, how are you going to make a movie just about Barbie, just about some Mattel little plastic dolls? How are you going to do this? It doesn't make sense. And then it made sense, and it was utterly hilarious. There were so many people online who were offended about this movie, that it had too many, women empowerment messages, and it, was offensive for men. No, it's a really silly movie. And if you have a sense of humor, you're not offended by any of the stereotypes, whether you're a woman or whether you're a guy. This movie was made for 3 different types of people. Either girls who played with Barbie dolls growing up, either LGBTQ community, or, like me, Ryan Gosling fans. One of those 3. That's it. That's all this movie was made for. Anybody else, don't watch this movie. But I will say it's utterly hilarious. Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie as Ken and Barbie are tremendous. Anytime they wrote in some sort of stereotype for men, I literally was laughing my ass off. And in having conversations with friends that are girls about this movie, they didn't take it serious either, and they laughed at every single part. So really, this movie is not offensive. It's so great. If you haven't gotten a chance to see it, or if you're like, I'm a guy, I don't wear pink or whatever, bro, drop the act, go and laugh at this movie. If you're somebody who hasn't seen it or is mad that it's on this list, try to watch this movie and not laugh. Like, it's not possible. It's absolutely great. One of the best comedies of the year, so it's definitely on my list. Number 8. Before I watched John Wick 4, I realized I had only seen John Wick 1. So I went back to go and watch John Wick 2 and 3. I wasn't sure because action movies nowadays are so like cliche and calculated, and they try and like paint by the numbers when it comes to action. but not John Wick 4. John Wick 4 literally is incredible and such a great way to end the John Wick franchise. I don't think I could speak more highly about the action scenes. Every movie has its own unique take, and it seems to get more and more real. And you feel that when you see Keanu Reeves actually doing real life martial arts, doing judo moves, jiu-jitsu moves, doing things that are actually practical and that actually work when applied in a street fight. It's incredible. And to have the throwback to Warriors, and to have the throwback to video games where it has that over the head shot where he's shooting people with that dragon's breath shotgun. Some of the stuff that they did in this movie was rather incredible. And to have Donnie Yen in here, like, let's just stop. Let's just stop. This movie was an incredible way to end John Wick. And every single scene where there's action is not like one that's taken place before it. This is definitely a must watch if you're an action fan, and if you have not completed the John Wick series and you've only seen one or two of them, watch the rest of them just to get to this. It's incredible. Oh my God, this whiskey is so smooth. Number 7. I went in to go watch Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, not realizing I hadn't seen the first one. This movie was so incredible. The animation style, there's not been anything like it. The voice acting, everything about this movie is tremendous, and the storyline is tremendous. I was a bit disappointed and a bit sad. I didn't realize I was getting myself into a two-parter of a movie, so when like it ended on sort of the cliffhanger that it does, I didn't realize there's a second movie to follow. Having all the Spider-Men and not having them be like, oh, we're just throwing this in there for nostalgia bait. It makes sense why you have all these Spider-Men in there. And also to see Childish Gambino in there. I mean, okay, come on. Let's just go. Let's go all the way to the bank with this. It's so much fun. It's so great. It's humorous. It feels like you're watching a live action comic. I couldn't get enough of this movie. It had to be on my list. I loved everything about it. Number 6. In a year where biopics have really taken over, I mean, let's look at all of them that have come out. Chevalier, Oppenheimer, Killers of Flower Moon, Tetris, Pinball, Dumb Money, Sound of Freedom, Iron Claw, Big George Foreman, Flaming Hot, Maestro, Blackberry, Gran Turismo, Priscilla, Napoleon, Ferrari, The Boys in the Boat, and Rustin. Air is the story of how Nike made the brand Air Jordan famous. It goes into all the story of how they found Michael Jordan, how they designed the shoe, and the comedy bits in between are utterly hilarious between Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Chris Tucker. One of my favorite parts about this movie is the fact that they didn't really show Jordan. They didn't show Jordan's face because the movie's not about Jordan. The movie is about Nike and how they made a brand of shoe that sells for tens of thousands of dollars. And people used to camp out for these. I know my cousin sure did. While the story's a bit dramatized, the movie does a great job of sticking to the facts as to what happened and how they landed a deal with Jordan.
You got a name for it? Air Jordan. Seriously? Maybe it'll grow on me.
Number 5. While I'm not a big fan of Netflix movies, They Clone Tyrone really won me over. John Boyega, Jamie Foxx, Tiana Paris, they all stole the show. Anytime they were together or somewhere on the screen, it was some of the best parts of the movie. It really is a great satire / like horror in the hood type movie. It almost reminds me of a more serious Undercover Brother without all the crazy antics that follow. The storyline, the writing, the acting, everything was tremendous about this movie, and we even did an amazing breakdown on 9 Nerd Yards, which you should go check out right now. Number 4. As soon as I saw the preview for this movie, I knew I was going to love it. I'm such a fan of Jeffrey Wright and everything he does. He's such a tremendous actor, and when I saw him do a more comedic role instead of a drama role, I was all here for it. Jeffrey Wright playing an author who's sort of seen better days and now writes a book that's more accommodating to a white audience who wants to hear nothing but hood tales. It's such satirical comedic brilliance. I really loved everything about this movie. And Sterling K. Brown, who plays his brother, definitely steals the show anytime he's in front of the screen. The story also has a B-plot of Thelonious, sort of finding love, but it takes a turn by the end of the movie where it leaves it a bit more ambiguous as will he, won't he, will they, won't they? And I really love that. The movie doesn't try to sell itself as a rom-com. It sells itself as a dramedy. It knows what it's doing, and it doesn't make pretend that it's a rom-com in any sort of way. It knows what it is, it knows what it's doing, and it knows which audience it's speaking to. I did a review on this movie, and I talked about how I watched this essentially, in a theater full of white people with one black person in it, and everybody was laughing at every funny bit of this movie. I thought it was going to be a bit more offensive, but it's actually just a movie that speaks the truth that I think at the end of the day is kind of for everyone. Number 3. The Sound of Freedom was definitely on my list of movies to watch, but I wasn't sure that I was going to tell people that I wanted to watch it. It had so much criticism behind it for being right-wing or for being too conservative or for pushing an agenda. But what it does in a lot of ways is tells a dramatized version of the life of Tim Ballard, a guy who has saved so many children from being trafficked. Trafficking is a serious issue, and it's a real issue, and it's never been addressed to film the way that it has been in this movie. This movie had so many moments where I genuinely teared up and cried, especially at the end. Jim Caviezel's been one of my favorite actors that I've missed seeing on the big screen, and I've been a fan of his since The Count of Monte Cristo. The movie does an incredible job of capturing some of the most heartfelt moments that Tim Ballard went through in his real life. It also takes some liberties in dramatizing some of his rescues and some of the things that he did, but at the end of the day, it does a great job getting its message across. Trafficking of children is an absolute abomination to humanity, and we must do everything that we can to stop this. And in most cases, movies aren't used to drive a point. They're used to entertain. And while this does a great job of entertaining, this movie makes you want to get up and do something about the ongoing epidemic going on around the world. Number 2. I think you just need to call me a Christopher Nolan whore, because at this point, I love everything that this man has done, and he can really do no evil in my book. I was so excited to see Oppenheimer, and I saw it the day after I saw Barbie. So I did do sort of the Barbieheimer thing. Oppenheimer does such an amazing job following the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer. This was a story I didn't know I needed to hear. The storyline is so easy to follow. It does such a great job of showing things in the past in color and what's going on in the present in black and white. Robert Downey Jr. is getting all of the awards as the best supporting actor for this movie. I feel it in my bones. He was so good as Louis Strauss. Every bit of this movie is so easy to follow along with, and you don't have to be a physicist or a scientist to follow along with the lingo they're talking in. I will say it really hurt my heart when I left the movie and was waiting for my Uber to go home, and I heard a group of people talking about this movie, and one of the girls in the group said, "I didn't even know Einstein was alive in 1940. I thought he was alive in the 1700s. Another person in the group said, "That movie got really deep and I lost track of what was going on because they were using some big words." It pains me at the time that this movie came out and the generation that's going to see this. This may go over some people's heads, but for the rest of us that did pretty good in school, I think you'll get every bit of this movie and you won't lose track of what's going on. And finally, number 1. As much as I'm a Christopher Nolan fan, I think I am just a sucker, the biggest sucker in the world, for a Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio duo movie. Anytime they do anything, just hand it all to them. They win. They win. The end. Killers of the Flower Moon is such an incredible movie. It is the longest movie on this list, topping out somewhere around 3.5 hours. But I will say, unlike when I watched Oppenheimer, where I checked my clock once or twice, during this movie, the pacing was so good, I didn't even realize I was in the movie theater for 3.5 hours. The fact that this movie was based on real events that happened in Oklahoma, in Osage, speaks to so much of the history of America that's hidden from the general public. Every bit of this movie you feel, and every bit of this movie is brought to life visually by Martin Scorsese's directorial style. Leonardo DiCaprio is incredible, and so is Jesse Plemons as the FBI agent who's looking to try and figure out what the heck is going on in Osage. If you're a fan of American history, a fan of biopics, a fan of Leonardo DiCaprio, a fan of a good director like Martin Scorsese, or a fan of a good drama that's probably going to win all the awards, this is your movie. And this right here was the best movie that came out in 2023, hands down. That's my list, folks. I will say too, I recently watched Saltburn. That did not end up on my top 10 list. It was a great movie, but it wasn't even on my honorable mentions because of the ending. It was so easy to see how the ending was going to turn out and who was responsible for everything at the end. And that may just be because I've seen a whole bunch of murder mysteries recently. I don't know, but go ahead, hit the comments up. Let me know what your top 10 movies were this year. I'd love to hear from y'all. In the meantime, I do appreciate y'all checking out the channel, giving so much support to me, to Nerds at Night, to watching the videos that you do. This might be the last video of this year, but I look forward to seeing everybody in 2024. So in the meantime, whenever you're watching this, I want to wish you a cheers. Happy New Year. I do appreciate you so much for every minute, for every second that you give our channel love, for every like, every comment, everything that you do. And whether you're watching this morning, evening, afternoon, I do appreciate you. And until next year, I will see you. Peace.